Welcome to Health Politics with Dr. Mike McGee, a weekly program exploring important trends in health.
Malaria. Have you thought much about it? Do you know where it comes from or how you get it? Probably not, because it's been virtually absent from highly developed nations since 1950. But take just a moment and you'll soon learn that for the rest of the world, malaria is a serious killer and children are among its most common victims. Plagued with acute spiking fevers and multi-organ failure, 3 million people a year die from malaria. One African child dies from it every 30 seconds. That's shocking. First, considering that malaria is treatable and preventable. And second, considering that in 2053 African heads of state pledged to cut deaths from malaria in half by 2010 through the Rollback Malaria Campaign. This project, an international alliance of more than 90 organizations, including the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the World Bank, has gone nowhere, despite the prominent groups involved. In fact, 6 years later, the situation has actually gotten worse. The number of deaths worldwide from malaria are higher than they were in 1998. How can that be? Well, to start with, the parasite that causes malaria is a very tough opponent. But beyond that, it turns out that one of the biggest reasons for malaria's new upward spiral is human poverty, clearly a growing concern in Africa. More on that later. But first, let's take a few minutes to become better acquainted with the physiology of this disease. Malaria is an infection caused by the parasite Plasmodium. It's transmitted to humans by the Anopheles mosquito. This mosquito is a unique carrier and transporter of Plasmodium for 3 reasons. It multiplies the parasite, it flies, and it loves biting humans. Of course, it can't bite you if it can't get to you. That's why development and focused mosquito control efforts have had such an impact in the developed nations where malaria is no longer a problem. It's common sense, for example, that modern housing with screens frustrates the mosquito's access to humans. Also, nations with resources have been able to drain swamps to eliminate breeding grounds, use indoor insecticides, and implement focused intervention when public health surveillance reveals an early outbreak. This is not to say that malaria never appears in the United States. It occasionally does. We've seen 1,500 cases in the past half-century. But more than 90% were contracted outside of the U.S. and carried into the country by travelers. And 7% of those infected contracted the disease from blood transfusions. You see, malaria and blood go hand in hand. Here's how it works. When an Anopheles mosquito seeks a blood meal for nourishment, it bites a human and injects the parasite into his bloodstream. The parasite travels rapidly with the blood throughout the body, but it centers in liver cells, which seem to be extraordinarily hospitable. In the liver, a single parasite can multiply into as many as 40,000 daughter cells within days. When the membranes of the cells can hold no more, they burst, releasing the load back into the bloodstream. These cells then enter red blood cells, multiply another 24 times or so, and burst again. Within 2 weeks, the human will feel the effects with fever and chills every 48 to 72 hours, timed with the red blood cell bursts. Anemia often develops with further red cell destruction, and for so many, death comes as a result of extensive organ failure. While you might think that that's the end of the story, it's actually only one chapter. It's important to note that while in the red blood cells, the Plasmodium parasite develops into male and female reproductive forms. When the infected victim is bitten by a new mosquito, these forms of the parasite go into that mosquito, where they mix inside the insect's stomach, multiply, and eventually burst. Thousands of cells travel to the mosquito's salivary glands, where they become poised and ready to enter and infect the next human who comes along. It's obvious that we understand malaria, and it's no secret that the disease is transmitted by mosquitoes. So given these things, why are the malaria numbers getting worse? Well, there is no single clear-cut answer, but two factors emerge ahead of others. First, the Plasmodium parasite is a uniquely complex enemy. And second, malaria is a disease of poverty, helped along by it and actually contributing to it. The Plasmodium parasite has more than 5,000 separate proteins. It's nearly invisible to our immune system, which means we have difficulty mounting a response to its entry into our bodies because we barely recognize its presence. Numbers of proteins and immune system sensitivity come into play when you're trying to develop an effective vaccine. And we've been trying for a while. 60% of the 100 or so vaccines under development for malaria target just 4 of the 5,300 proteins. Are they the right ones to generate human immunity? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, traditional low-cost medicines for malaria are increasingly ineffective. Drugs like chloroquine, quinine, and sulfadoxine pyrimethamine have been sidestepped by Plasmodium, whose modern variants have developed resistance to these therapies. The scientific response? A new brand of medicine, the artemisinin compounds, used in combination with older compounds which can cure malaria in as few as 3 days. But that's if you can get to a doctor or a clinic, if the diagnosis is made, if the medicines are there and available to you despite your lack of resources, and if you take them as directed. Now, that's a lot of ifs, and they bring us back to the question of poverty. Jeffrey Sachs, director of the UN Millennium Project, says the poorest of the poor, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, are caught in a poverty trap that's exacerbated by rapid increases in population. The high childhood mortality rates that go along with malaria infestation lead to reactive high fertility rates. That is, already compromised adults will have more children than they would normally in order to achieve the desired number of surviving children. This high fertility, high mortality environment presents very high costs at both a household and a national level. Even the children who survive have poor nutrition and are often cognitively impaired. The mothers are tied up with the sick children, crops don't get planted, nutrition declines, savings and investment income falls, children miss school, and parents are less able to migrate toward where the work and the clinics are available. Sounds very bleak. But some experts say this vicious cycle is capable of reversal. How? Arata Kochi, the new malaria chief at the WHO, credited with progress against tuberculosis, says we need 3 things right now. Number 1, widespread availability of artemisinin combination therapy at low cost with timely intervention. It's possible, through organized efforts, to get this medicine to the poorest of the poor. Number 2, massive distribution of free insecticide-treated bed nets, with training throughout endemic areas and consistent use reinforced by public companies. And number 3, reinstitution of the use of DDT indoor spraying twice a year. The phasing out of DDT, as part of the Persistent Organic Pollutants Treaty in the late 1990s, has now been clearly linked to advancing spread of the disease in the past decade. And according to the UN's Dr. Sachs, there's one more thing we need: resources. He says that the key to breaking the poverty trap is increasing assistance from rich countries to enable the poorest countries to put the basic infrastructure and human capital in place. This will help fight disease, establish a network of primary health care posts, improve and extend schooling, and build the network of roads, power, and telecommunications on which a modern economy depends. Malaria may not be a concern in the West, but ignoring its impact on a world we are increasingly connected to is a mistake of historic proportions. For Health Politics, I'm Mike McGee.
Thank you for watching Health Politics with Dr. Mike McGee. If you're accessing Health Politics with a portable device, please visit our homepage, healthpolitics.org, for more information on this topic and many others. If you're watching Health Politics on the Internet, please visit the links below for additional information. Download the transcript and slides to share with friends or colleagues, or use the discussion guide to help generate conversations in the classroom. If you are not yet a Health Politics subscriber and would like to begin receiving a weekly email to keep you up to date on our latest programs, please click on Subscribe to Health Politics above and enter your email address. Again, thank you for watching Health Politics with Dr. Mike McGee.